Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook podcast. I'm excited to be here with Jamie Patton. Jamie is currently in the middle of a big Kickstarter campaign, so immediately go out and support Spinnortality. I think I'm saying that correctly.
That is correct, yeah. And you say it's a big campaign. I mean, the goal is 10,000 euros, which is not so big. But it's big to me, at least.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead, just give us a little intro about yourself and the game. Yeah.
Sure. I'll do the game first because I think that's maybe why people are here. So Spinnortality is a cyberpunk strategy or management game where you are the CEO of a global megacorporation. So there's a lot of cyberpunk games where you play the little guy, you play the hacker or the cyborg or something, trying to bring down the corporation. In my game, you are the corporation, and it's your job to crush any opposition and to sell terrible products the world over, but then convince all of the markets that actually these products are all fantastic and that they will enrich their lives and totally not enslave them or mind control them or whatever.
Awesome. I'm just looking at the Kickstarter site. It looks like there's some good things that are being said already. PC Gamer says, it's a delicious premise and executed well. Remarkably deep simulation with more layers of strategy emerging as your company grows. So that's nice. Turns out it's pretty cool being the evil CEO of a worldwide conglomerate. It's a harrowing tale of the reach corporations could or do have in reality. This is pretty much straight up my alley, the Silver Spook. This is it would have been great to have this as the first podcast because that's pretty much what I am about. Like Neofeud it's a dystopic world, except you're on the other side of it. You're the upstart neo-feudal overthrowers of the neo-feudal mega corporate society, and in this one you're the you're playing the evil side, which is I really like that concept. I like the flipping that trope on its head of rebelling, being the rebel, not being the rebel, being the overlord, evil corporate overlord.
It's like
really
rebelling against the narratives of rebellion that we've been given so far.
Yeah, exactly. That's one comment I say often on this podcast is I like Cyberpunk. Unfortunately, I feel like it can get a little bit stale when Cyberpunk amounts to just the pink mohawks and flying car and rain and to make something cyberpunk. I look at a lot of Cyberpunk. I find in a lot of Facebook groups on Cyberpunk, and a lot of it is just kind of like screenshot after screenshot after screenshot of Blade Runner ripoffs. And I'm like, so this is kind of like I try to do something fresh with Neofeud, and it throws in kind of a Game of Thrones medieval overlay onto and political intrigue overlay onto the cyberpunk genre, and a little bit different visuals, more like District 9-ish, not all neon and at night. And Spinnortality is kind of takes the, if I feel like it's kind of there's a couple games I can think of that feel a little similar, like Syndicate, maybe. There's a couple maybe not, I'm misremembering, but there's a few strategy games, but never at this. Oh, the one game I could think of was Neo-Colonialism. I don't know if you heard of this game.
I have not, but it sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, Neo-Colonialism, Ruin Everything is the subtitle. It's a small indie game. It's free to play. I don't know, maybe it's like $2. It's a really small game. Okay. But it's it's made by a guy who had opinions. He makes art games. But this looks like a bigger project. Everything I read about it, I was really excited by. Just the level of detail into being able to buy politicians. I think I had ideas for a strategy game that I just made up one night and played with pen and paper with some friends. But this is like a full on video game with manipulate politics, run a corporate empire, espionage, buy off
exactly. The chain is that you start off just having to make ends meet. And so you research these horrible products, there's a Metacritic for friendship, or there's a hormone cloud that allows you to manipulate the emotions of your workers. And then you had to sell them to different markets. But it's easy to sell if you can manipulate how the if you can manipulate the culture of each market. So then you had to buy up the media to manipulate culture, and then some of the products are illegal in some nations, so then you need to bribe politicians in order to deregulate the industries. And then if that isn't enough, then you need to do black ops and espionage to like start riots or spread fake news or rig elections so that your politicians get in. And it just kind of spirals out from this, fairly simple project, which is just, make some money, into, oh, okay, now in order to keep going, you had to kind of ruin the whole world and completely dominate it. Yeah.
I was like, it's kind of like, it's basically all the all the worst things you read about, or fictional, and some of it is not so fictional, about the way that the corporate and the what do you call global capitalism market system unfortunately works and made into games. So I mean, like, it's like this is like the perfect sort of perfect Cyberpunk Silver Spook podcast title to be talking about. I hope that it's somewhat the full disclosure. This is somewhat self-interest. If the Cyberpunk game of this level of seriousness and this does well, it's going to be good for Silver Spook Games, because people will. I hope that more people get more interested in these kind of games and not just Cyberpunk. I've been a little bit. I always get curmudgeon-y and old on this podcast, and I say, "Darn, these kids, they don't understand what Cyberpunk is." Because I'm a Gibson fan. I'm old school, like capital L literature, Cyberpunk with a capital C from the 1980s. I'm trying to get William Gibson on this podcast. I might get him on.
Pretty amazing. Yeah.
So he's gonna follow up, and then you can be on with him, and you can ask him all your questions.
Excellent.
That you want.
I probably shouldn't have done this, but when I was launching the Kickstarter, I wanted to let as many people know as possible. So I successfully found Rudy Rooker's email as well as Bruce Sterling's, and I found William Gibson's Twitter handle, and I sent messages to all of them. None of them have written back yet, but it feels kind of magical that these, cyberpunk gods are out there in the ether, and you can technically, get in contact with them.
Yeah, I'm definitely. Do you know who Bruce Bethke is?
I haven't heard of him, no.
Okay, he coined the term cyberpunk. The first short story, Cyberpunk, was written by Bruce. I'm talking with. He might be on one of the podcasts, so. Okay. And then the cyberspace.
I
go ahead.
Really appreciate what you were saying about these darn kids don't understand Cyberpunk, because the inception of this idea was there was a Cyberpunk game jam where everyone had to make a Cyberpunk game over a weekend or something, and a friend of mine actually wrote a blog post about the best games that he played there, and in that blog post he actually did a little bit of Cyberpunk history, and that really interested me because I didn't know anything about Cyberpunk except Blade Runner, pink hair, that kind of thing, and I didn't realize that it was actually a fairly serious fictional critique of capitalism coming out of an era that was ultra-capitalist, because you had Thatcher and Reagan and so on. And that really got me interested. So then I started to read, I read Neuromancer, of course, and I also read Mirror Shades, which was the first cyberpunk anthology, which is actually surprisingly un-cyberpunk, in that it doesn't have the aesthetic yet, but it has a lot of the themes, it has a lot of the topics. There's one story about a cathedral after the end of the world where all the statues are alive. It's not cyberpunk because it's not about technology, but it is cyberpunk because it's about a world that's slowly dying. But the one that really got me was I read Bruce Sterling's Islands in the Net, which is, to my mind, it's the one cyberpunk novel that I've read which is really, really great, because it's about more than just the aesthetics or cyborg ninjas or whatever. It's also about the main character is this very ambitious, career-driven woman. And so on the one hand, she doesn't really like the power that corporations have in this world because she can see that it's not helpful. On the other hand, she would like to become CEO of her own company one day. And so she's kind of balancing these two things and just sort of trying to stay sane. And ultimately, she is a servant of the company that sends her into all these different locations. And it talks a lot about brand loyalty and brand recognition and the company trying to be your friend. and it also talks a lot about like the long-term failure of how democracies work right now, and how it would be logical to assume that maybe corporations might fill a governmental role down the line. And that really got me, because, you know, we're a long way away from Mohawk cyborg ninjas jumping off the wall. We're into, like, what does it mean to exist in this society, and what changes is it undergoing? And I thought, okay, if that's cyberpunk, what kind of game can I make about that? And so I came up with this one.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's definitely like, you know, it's interesting how it's kind of like, there's like almost like a bifurcate. Well, it's like, you know, Blade Runner, Neuromancer, they all have their own circles. It's kind of, you know, it's a lot like I think of Cyberpunk. It is a movement in a certain sense, in it, like the civil rights movement, the Occupy movement, the, you know, some of the more recent darker movements. It has its multi faces, like a Hydra. You know, it doesn't really, you know, and like nobody can really control like what is Cyberpunk nowadays. I mean, obviously Blade Runner 2049 is dominating. You know, the if you talk about like, you know, cultural manipulation and spinotocracy, not that anybody's manipulating culture, but whatever the biggest splash is what people are picking up on. And so, you know, Blade Runner 2049, and this is why I say it's self-interest, because if a big cyberpunk work, anything that has a tag cyberpunk on it, flops, then that impacts the, you know, the market might have been primed for more cyberpunk products and things, and then if something flops, you know, all of a sudden all the, you know, nobody's searching for it anymore, you know, or if a certain type of cyberpunk that is just the pink mohawks and just the visual aesthetic cyberpunk without the meat succeeds, then that makes people who search for cyberpunk just expect to see the pink mohawk. Like, I had a lot of complaints, like, why isn't there more neon, and why isn't there, like, you know, big breasted anime chicks in this? This is not cyberpunk. You know, it's like, it's not cyberpunk because it's, you know, it doesn't have, everything needs to be like polished and flat and, you know, or you know, all cell shaded, and that's cyberpunk. So this is like weird. You know, I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around what the heck is going on nowadays. But I mean, my core thing has always been the original, you know, the critique of capitalism, you know, the punk, right? The punk in cyberpunk is, you know, a punk movement is a rebellion against anti-authoritarian. It's the, you know, in the 80s, like you said, the Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, you know, created basically a similar to what the young people are experiencing nowadays, which is a depression, where you go out, you graduate from college, you try to get a job, and you're like, oh crap, I can't do anything, I'm going to drink some vodka, take my shirt off, and start yelling and screaming and making loud music, and, you know, and trying to shake something up. You know, that was what punk was about giving a middle finger to, you know, the unfortunately less happy world that they were entering, that they were promised something better. American dreams in America. I don't know what they had in UK, but anyway, so the punk thing, I was like, where the heck did that go? You know, and we saw the cyber, not so much the punk. So anyway, I agree with everything that you just said.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can. I mean, I certainly think that punk was a movement. Maybe it still is. I'm not really sure. Cyberpunk, I'd say, is a movement in the sense of it was a literary movement which attempted to bring those things to people's attention and to kind of express something that maybe the authors themselves were not even aware of around all those things. I don't know if you can really compare it to the civil rights movement, because those, like, oppressions seem much more, they just seem worse to me. And I don't know how you can compare it to the Occupy movement, but these are all things that I try to tread on very lightly and respectfully, because, you know, I'm a white, straight, well, mostly straight, middle-class man, so, you know, I don't really know how to navigate a lot of these different intersections. But certainly Cyberpunk was a movement, and I think the problem that's happened is that with the success of the movement in a fictional way in the 1980s, capitalism basically seized on that, and then movie producers and publishers and comic book publishers and all these other people, they started to see, wait, we can make money off this. And by the time you get to the present day, you have, you know, multi-million-dollar video games and multi-million-dollar movies which are branded cyberpunk, but they don't, like, sometimes they critique the system, sometimes they don't. A lot of it is just aesthetic. And this is something I've been grappling with. Is it possible to have a cyberpunk work which, costs more than $1 million? Because maybe that is just a contradiction. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like punk. I mean, I guess you could say like all movements, yeah. And again, yeah, don't worry about it, being there's nobody who's going to get mad at you on this podcast for being mostly straight. And anyways, it's I feel like I think of movement in terms of, it's not, like the civil rights and social movement. The punk movement was, there's a lot of overlapping. In a certain sense, they're all connected. In a sense, they're something of the common people, trying to. They're an expression, like in an evolution, like an outburst, a catharsis of the anger of a certain group of the average members of society, as opposed, like, you don't really have like movements of the evil mega corporations. Like, they don't all get together and take their shirts off and party in Woodstock, or there's not like an evil corporate, I guess Davos, I don't know, but it's not like, I guess they have some movements, but mostly their movements are like, should we have anyway, I'm not going to insult rich people. They're nice mostly, I think. I don't know too many of them. Actually, there's a lot of rich people in Hawaii, but I shouldn't say too much about them. They won't hire me. Anyway, we'll get to that long story later on.
Okay.
But basically, I would say that Cyberpunk, it is like, I think that it's at a weird crossroads right now, because it went in the 80s, it was mainstream. Billy Idol, right, makes an album, Cyberpunk. Neuromancer, 1984, not 1984. Blade Runner comes out. I guess Blade Runner didn't really do that well, but in the literary circles, in the youth, in the style circles, in the cultures, certain cultural circles, there got big, and then it kind of went away for some time. Johnny Mnemonic, right? So Johnny Mnemonic didn't do super awesome. William Gibson's Neuromancer was really hard to adapt. They've been trying to adapt it for like, there's been 10 different directors, and like, it's been in and out of IMDb in production mode for like the last 20, 30 years. I've been keeping up on this for a long time. Joseph Kahn, Chris Cunningham, Vincenzo Natali of Splice. I think Deadpool, the director of Deadpool, is currently in talks to direct Neuromancer. Okay. I don't know about Bruce. Bruce Sterling's probably pissed off because he hasn't got Islands in the Net on the table yet. But Snow Crash is coming, so that's the Neil Stephenson Cyberpunk. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I know that one. I read Snow Crash, and I read Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon is really interesting because it's kind of neo-cyberpunk in that it came 15 or so years after Neuromancer, I think. But it really pushes its unique idea to the absolute limit, and the unique idea is, what if we could really switch bodies, and what if our bodies like kept a little bit of us, like muscle memory and stuff. And I think it's a really interesting book from that perspective. I read the Altered Carbon and the series. I can't remember all the books. So the Vulcan Furies, I think, was the last one. But Richard K was like, I'd say he's like one of the, in the 2000s, in the noughties or whatever they call them, he was one of the big, the most prominent, I think, of the cyberpunk. Or I would say, well, there is the Wind Up Girl, which is kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with Paolo Bacigalupi's. It's kind of adjacent to cyberpunk. It's not quite. It's more like, I don't know, not foodie. It's like nature punk or something. It doesn't have the cyber, but it's got the critique of the economic, financial, political system, and like really deep. It's got that aspect to it. In some ways, it's actually
the main thing. Yeah, I think for cyberpunk to mean anything as a genre, it's got to keep that. And I think the reason why it's been like less influential and has only survived in these shell forms is that people haven't understood that, and they've taken the aesthetics and then the power of these systems and capital and business and all these things has ensured that people do extra well in forgetting it.
Yeah, it's definitely like, I think, going back to what I was saying, you discover shortly that the Silver Spook podcast is a tangent marathon. Is how many tangents can Silver Spook go on? But getting back to what I was going to say about that, the cyberpunk, the original literary, the original thrust of it, right? Which was, William Gibson was a punk. John Shirley, right, who was one of another like cyberpunk, like almost proto cyberpunk authors. A song called Youth. He was an actual punk, like he played in punk bands. Bruce Sterling was kind of like, he. I shouldn't say anything back because I'm gonna try to get him on the podcast. But he was the chairman of Cyberpunk. William Gibson said that, so I won't get in trouble. The chairman of Cyberpunk, he was like, very much wanted to be the leader of the movement. Like he created the Military's Anthology, and those guys, they had a certain chip on their shoulder. I think William Gibson's original impetus for Burning Chrome, which is the predecessor, the short story collection that he made, that was a predecessor to Neuromancer. He had a reaction to he had the sci-fi that he had read in the 60s and really liked, and the 70s it had started to go toward it, like you just said, like it started to move towards more corporate, more streamlined, more just fun romps. And he made this it was like kind of like fun romps with strong-jawed white guys with beautiful big-breasted white women, in the ivory tower future with 70-lane highways, and it's the golden, the pristine flying cars everywhere, and everybody's happy, and and he kind of got pissed off, and he's like, what happened to the cyberpunk? What happened to the science fiction that was shaking things up in the 60s? And so he wrote this. It was called the Gernsback Continuum. I don't know if you heard of this story, but it's a great short story. Anyways, it's kind of like it was kind of his like middle finger to this world of science fiction, and so. But over time, like it's kind of like he even like distanced himself. A lot of the original Gibson did, Sterling didn't. They started distancing themselves from cyberpunk because it was being co-opted. I mean, it's kind of like I talked about this on a previous podcast, but all movements, all revolutions eventually they're inherently unstable. And eventually somebody is going to come in and be like, hey, we can make a lot of money off of this rock music, or this hip hop, this underground hip hop music, this cyberpunk. It's like people are wearing these clothes, we could put that on a plastic, you're putting it on a plastic lunchbox and you're selling it, as Jeff Goldblum would say. And that's going to happen. It happened in cyberpunk, and now like this, it's coming back again. Like it kind of went out of fashion after people figured out that, hey, Johnny Mnemonic's not making $30 billion, so we're not going to do any more of these movies. And then it kind of went away, and The Matrix came back, but now it's really coming back. Like they're doing a ton of cyberpunk. So I'm also worried that the same thing's gonna happen, right? So the original thrust is gonna come back, and then it's gonna be lost. And I in a certain sense, like I do agree with you. Like there's a paradox, right? How do you make an a critique of capitalism, a critique of the way that the economy, political system, all the global systems function, that's kind of that is also making enough money for or that is successful. It's kind of like you're basically, the seeds of its own destruction are like inside of it. You're basically saying, I don't want to be successful, or I guess you're like Pearl Jam. I don't know if you know who this is, an American band. They're the one band that never sold out in the 90s, and they still exist, right? But they kind of just hang out in the background. I guess a lot of the cyberpunk guys are kind of like that. I mean, I hope that. I mean, I personally, like, I would love it if Spinnortality makes $30 million and Neofeud makes some amount of that, and another good cyberpunk. All the people who come on this podcast, if you come on this podcast, then basically you can put a badge on that says I'm a cyberpunk. I'm joking, but I hope that everybody makes some amount of money, and I do hope that there is some balance in between just like Star Wars, Disney owning all the IP on the planet, and then just making it all in all the money, and a few massive corporations making trillions of dollars, and everybody else just kind of like programming in their underwear in a cardboard box, eating ramen for the rest of their life. Like, I hope there's some balance between that, where somebody can have maybe a mortgage one day, or maybe not a mortgage, maybe like a four walls, and maybe some food, and maybe some healthcare, and then make some games, like maybe 1 million of those people. So anyways, long rant, but basically, I feel like there's like a lot of topics we could talk about. Here's something I was really interested in. What is your other jobs? Like, where did you get all the ideas for this? Because it seems like you have a lot of insight into this stuff.
That's a good question. Somebody asked, do you have a background in finance? And I'm like, no, I've just read a lot of blog posts and I watched a YouTube series one time. My background's actually in the arts. I studied English at Cambridge, which was very interesting and taught me a lot of critical tools for dissecting culture. But it was a bit old-fashioned. And so then I did interactive media at Goldsmiths for my master's. And that really helped me understand how all of media, culture, politics, how all of these things kind of lock together and influence each other and are influenced by each other. Right now, I'm making ends meet living in Vienna by teaching English, but I'm teaching business English. And so that means that, first of all, I've been able to teach and learn a lot about, say, how to negotiate in English. And I've learned all the key vocabulary. So I know about subsidiaries and parent companies and, market share and that kind of thing, which is all a bit standard, but it's what I've been dealing with just in the back of my mind for the last 4 years. And I also get to I get to teach people who can sometimes be quite high up in their organizations. So I'm teaching one person who is largely responsible for laying cable in a major European. He's responsible for laying cable in an Austrian internet company, but that company is owned by another company, which is this huge European internet corporation that nobody's heard of because they've only heard of the subsidiaries, because the top brand is not known about, but the sub-brands are known about. So that's kind of interesting. I've also talked to somebody who worked for an international supermarket / stationery shop chain. And so she told me basically how to manage a takeover of a company in a different country, and then how to incorporate that into your current administration, that kind of thing. Wow. So exactly, and this is stuff that you'd never kind of learn just doing one job. But I'm very fortunate in that I've been able to talk to all these different people and get an overview of just little, tiny pieces of each job.
Yeah. Because I was like, you can kind of tell that you had some access to some of the finer details, or at least it's researched. So that's really good. And it's a very bold move. I mean, I hope that you don't get assassinated in the next 36 hours, because you might be outing. It's fictional. It's not real. Exactly. I mean, that's the thing that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, the great thing is that I don't even need to specifically name any companies in the game. Some of the things in the game are inspired by real world events. There was a scandal with, I think it was. I can't remember the name of the car company now. So, and I don't want to say it in case I get it wrong, but there was a scandal with a car company where if your keyring was too heavy, then it would turn off the gas, and that would mean that the brakes didn't work. And so a few people died because the cars were broken and unsafe. And what was really interesting about this was that they sold the cars for years after they knew about this problem. And then they just kind of admitted to it after they took on a new CEO. So everyone who was actually directly involved had already left, and they left this new CEO holding the bag. And so that's in there because there are some products where you get an inkling that something may not be right with these products, and then you can research them, and it might turn out that these products are actually harming people, and then you can go public, or you can just quietly bury it. And I don't think I need to mention the name of the car company because it's not important. What's important is that this is not only possible, to an extent it is expected in the current business landscape. We know that there will be certain scandals in the business world, and we know that some of them will lead to people's deaths because some people are too fond of making money, or they're interested in their share price or whatever. Right.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, there's definitely that's the main topic. That's the main topic that I'm interested in. I mean, just a little. I mean, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. Mm-hmm. So I'm from Hawaii, and Neofeud. I mean, the tagline of Neofeud is cyberpunk dystopia is here. Is just reality is very good at papering over the dystopic parts, and and I say that because you think of Hawaii's image, right? You just say the word Hawaii, right? It just blue. You think of vacation. It's like happy. It's like the tropical Disneyland, right? And that's basically what it is. And I'm native Hawaiian. I'm mixed race, but I consider myself Hawaiian. My sister is she's a Hawaiian language major. My brother works in teaches like indigenous culture and education. We're Hawaiian, but I'm also, my last name is Miller, and that's because I'm part German, because of we have a heritage of the plantation, plantation culture where it was neo-colonial. It was kind of like the prototype to the modern market, where they basically brought lots of people from around the world, from China, from Japan, from Portugal, from Philippines. And they said, we don't want anybody to overthrow our system, so we're going to make it really hard for everyone to get along, and you're all going to work for really bad pay.
Nobody could communicate because they all came from different places. And
and so
possible to have an uprising.
Yeah, no uprising, right? Because Haiti, that was bad. We don't want the slaves uprising. I mean, they weren't slaves. They were, basically just, working for basically almost nothing, hoping to get ahead in the future.
So they were working for almost nothing. They've been brought here on false pretenses, and they couldn't really get out.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
that sounds kind of slavey. So I see what you mean.
Yeah, and for working for it was basically American business guys came down. Anyway, so long story short, basically, Hawaii it's got the plantation history, and on top of that, like, so today, I'm in Hawaii. I was born in basically the area of Hawaii that's, I call it the not so nice side of the coconut trees. It's basically the ghetto, where all my neighbors are living like 10, 20 to a house. I always joke we had pork and beans for dinner every night. Spam was the regular thing on the menu.
Wow.
We ran around barefoot in the jungle, and our favorite game was like dodge the rock, because we couldn't afford balls. So but my dad was my family's hardcore Catholic, like old school GFK Catholic. My dad taught at a Catholic school, so I could afford to go to a rich, fancy school. President Obama went to the school right up the street from my school. Some of the CEOs of the biggest tech companies went to this school. The American elite that didn't want to that moved to Hawaii, they go, they send their kids to this school. So it's there's the highest concentration of billionaires on the island that I'm from, Oahu. It has some of the wealthiest people. Mark Zuckerberg is trying to buy one of our islands. Larry Ellison already owns one of our islands. And it's like so I was living in this ghetto, and basically my dad had the most garbage 30-year-old Toyota car, and he still has ancient cars. Driving to this school, where I was basically, bullied. I was like, I was the one brown guy, with lots of really well-off, nicely dressed, really expensive clothing, white and Asian people, and it was like, it was not very fun. And it was like shoved in my face. Like I had Cyberpunk in my face like every day. Like, one day, in the morning I would be like in the slum, in the sprawl. And then I would be in the Villa Straylight. I don't know if you're familiar, or like I would be in the, for the next 6 hours of the day, and then I come back to the sprawl, and I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
It's almost like it's almost like inevitable that I would find Cyberpunk and connect with it, because that was my experience. And it's like to this day. I mean, we have I was a teacher at a school. I work with the underprivileged kids in the area. I taught STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math to basically kids from the city, from my area. Where they're basically forgotten. I mean, it's great because we got there's lots of rich people, there's lots of nice beaches, there's lots of nice weather, it's really nice. But there's this whole class of people that works 3 jobs. Like I was working 2 jobs, and we were basically homeless. We would have been homeless without the help of my parents. Most of the people live just jam packed. We were living in basically a closet. I have a wife and kids, and we were struggling to get by. And most people are struggling. Everybody I talk to on the islands this island is insane. I don't know how I'm gonna, basically they work there for a little while, and then either they leave or they get promoted to CEO or a high level real estate agent, or they just be stressed out and insane for the rest of their life, or homeless. Like 30% of the kids that I was teaching were homeless. They were all on drugs. Not they were all on drugs, but they are all potential. There's tons of drugs there, and our job was to keep
the drugs. They're potential drug users.
Yeah.
And like, and it's not even necessarily their fault. There's a lot of moralizing around drug use anyway, but it's not necessarily their fault, because, you know, if that's the hand that life, well, that society has dealt you, then, you know, some people are gonna just wind up hooked, because what else are they gonna do with their lives? Jesus.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so it was, you know. And so anyway, so I was like, I experienced that. Then I worked with it, and you know, it made me more and more mad, like every day. And after, like, and what made me the most mad was at the top, I would see these individuals. They'd be like, you know, like you said, you know, airbrushing their public image, like taking pictures. When I'll be working with kids in like the Native Hawaiian, you know, a traditional cultural like taro patch where they made the laulau and the poi. If you've ever been to Hawaii, it's like they have the luau, right? And they'd be like working in this taro patch, and then there'd be these politicians and these like corporate guys and all these trying to get elected or trying to move up in the cities. Tourism industrial complex, and they'd be coming down taking pictures with like me, because I'm brown, and these other brown and mixed race kids taking pictures and trying to get in these photo ops, while I'm being paid basically nothing, and I'm almost homeless, and they're taking a picture and then making me write a story about how they did such a great job for the people and getting promotions, having, you know, multiple houses. Their kids are going to that really expensive school. I can't afford to send my kids to that $25,000-$30,000 a year private school. So that it's just basically, you know, it was just so anyway. So that's where I really connected with Cyberpunk, is because I was living in it. And so and that's why, you know, that's why I like this. I like anything that has anything to do with it, because it's it is a very personal thing. I mean, apart from the aesthetics, I like trench coats and I like the mirror shades. That's nice stuff. I wear these shades. This is not wearing these shades because I'm trying to be like the Terminator on you. I'm wearing these shades because it's actually pinhole glasses, so it helps me to see.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just it just works out. That's the Silver Spook games, and it looks nice too.
Mirror shades, exactly.
Yeah, so it's accident. I'm accidentally stylish. I'm actually not this cool. Anyways, but the point is that so it's like the cyberpunk, that part of the punk, the critique of the inequality, the cautionary, like, let's not do this. This is kind of really bad stuff. Let's not do that. Is like that. I was like in that before I knew what it was. Like I like kind of lived through that, and I have people, you know, telling me like, oh, you know, I don't know. It gets kind of. I talked to another guy recently, and he was saying something like, you know, it's fine. Like, don't you see, the world is getting better. Hunger is down, infant mortality is down. Everything's getting better. Don't worry about it. And like, I mean, I was kind of like, I'm looking at it. Okay, I guess statistically, you're less likely to be like, you know, in the medieval ages, you might have been tortured, you might have been starving, you might have been, you know, hunted, you know, you might have been like attacked by roving, you know, bands of brigands. You know, 200 years ago, you might have worked in a Dickensian, you know,
like a boot blacking factory or something.
Yeah, and so that was bad. But I was like, you know, like, I don't know, man. I and I know, like, my personal experience is not everybody's experience. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, when somebody says, "Hey, don't worry about it. The world's going to be great. Markets are going to solve everything. You know, we're great."
Yeah,
you know, what do you think?
I mean, I think that. Well, first of all, I'd just like to talk about your experience. I think, holy crap, I do not know what to say. I think that it sounds like the way that wealth is distributed on your island is an absolute travesty. It sounds like it is, you know, an incredible injustice, and I completely see why you connect with Cyberpunk, because it's that same level of, there are people living in boxes and there are people living in space stations. It's that level of bizarreness. Yeah. And I'm constantly appalled. I'm not surprised anymore, but I'm constantly appalled that we live in a world which is meant to be, you know, advanced and just and fair, and this shit, like, it doesn't just keep happening. It's like it's baked in. About the statistics, those statistics, they don't give me hope. The fact that, like, world hunger is down and child education is up and stuff, that's good, but that's like the one thing that keeps me sane. It's like the one glimmer of hope, because I think that our society tells us that things are going to get better, and that yes, things in a sense have got better because, like, we have iPhones now where we didn't in the past, and we have more, you know, laws to help us avoid, you know, sexual harassment or, you know, unfair working hours. But I think you'd have to be naive to just take that at face value, because every single one of those laws which made the world better was very, very hard fought. I think in every single one, people, like, they either risked their lives or they actually died, because there is that much at stake here. And I just think that, you know, everyone has to try and make the world better, not just on a personal level, but they have to try and make it better on a political level, whether that means, like, really thinking about who you vote for, or calling your senator or whatever. I also think that at the end of the day, life is not better now than it was in the past. I think about this a lot because there are a lot of articles like millennials have ruined golf, or millennials have ruined the wine industry or something. It's like, hey, you know why we don't play golf? One, it's a game for stupid rich people, and two, it's really expensive. It's just, the thing that really woke me up to this was I saw an article which talked about wealth distribution, and there was this graph of the wealth gap between the top 0.1% and the bottom 99.9% for the last 120 years. And it starts really high in about 1890 because, of course, you had aristocrats and they had a shit ton of money. And then over the course of the 20th century, it dips for World War I, and it dips World War II because the war kind of destabilizes things, and it shakes up the wealth distribution a bit because the nations at war had to sort of pump money into industry in order to fight the war. And then around 1950, it starts to climb back up again because, like, capitalism is reasserting itself. And now we are at the point where the wealth is distributed as unfairly as it was in 1890. You are now, if you want to become a millionaire, it is now a better bet to marry into a family of millionaires than to try and make your millions honestly. Because we are creating a new aristocracy. There are these families which just, wealth is kind of siphoned towards them, and then they just kind of sit on it, and they might invest it a little bit, but mostly they are just accumulating more and more wealth. And then the rest of us, we have declining wages, we have increasing homelessness, we have credit shocks like the 2008 financial crisis, which, you know, don't really help matters. And generally speaking, it's just harder to get by these days. And I think that's true of everyone who is not already quite wealthy. So I think your experience is, you know, uniquely illustrative of this effect. But the segregation between the sprawl and the stray light villa, as you put it, I think that is real, and I think it is constantly happening. And I think it will just continue to happen. Until we have some kind of fundamental shift, whether that's, I mean, theoretically a war would shake that up, but I'd like to avoid that. My money's on maybe we can figure out some kind of universal income system, which might help to redistribute wealth a little bit. There's a friend of mine who says, nope, it's got to be full socialism. And I don't know, maybe he's right.
Yeah, I mean, like, basically agree with all of that. Oh, it's good to know that I'm not totally insane, because this guy had me feeling like, well, he's from, I don't want to say anything bad about Scandinavia, you know. This is where, when Michael Moore makes his anti-capitalist movies, he goes up there to find the best ideas, you know, where they have, I mean, generally speaking, if you want to, in the cyberpunk dystopia, that's going to be the silver lining area is kind of up on the north end. My wife's from Canada, so they have a little better, in North America, they're doing better than the US. So, you know, there's some pockets where they're doing a bit better, but I feel like, you know, again, like, my experience colors mine. And I feel like if you're from those areas, you might not be quite as worried. They already have basically kind of the safety nets and the level of social welfare, the economic inequality levels are not quite as bad in certain areas. But generally, I feel like, yeah. So I agree with your points that, you know, and that is the point, is that overall, yes, in certain areas of the third world, they're basically being brought up to, you know, they're going through like 200 years or 150 years of industrialization very rapidly, so they're doing better than they were in some senses. But globally, it's definitely we're all the plane. I say the plane is kind of tipped in a downwards trajectory overall. And I don't want to suggest that, like, it's not good that certain third world countries are doing better. I mean, that's wonderful, and like I said, that lets me sleep at night, because it's like, hey, maybe we're not completely fucked.
My problem is, like, eventually these third world countries are, I hope, going to catch up with the rest of us. And in some areas, they're already doing quite well. But, like, what happens then? I mean, if they just kind of slot into this existing kind of broken system, then that's not really better. I also wonder, my girlfriend has this theory that capitalism requires an underclass. That whether it's third world workers or whether it's people who are like unemployed or very low wage working class, that capitalism cannot survive without a bunch of people who basically get shat on. So it will be interesting to see what happens if the third world does catch up, because then maybe we'll actually have to try and fix the system which required them in the first place. But I really don't know at this point.
Yeah, I think. On this, I think that there's definitely something to that. In a certain sense, like the fossil fuel industry and capitalism. I mean, they're almost inextricably linked in multiple senses. In one sense, that jump started the Industrial Revolution, which kind of jump started the first Gilded Age, the first what do you call academics would call it the explosion of the amount of human energy. The human to energy potential exploded with the fossil fuel, and so it's connected in that sense. And it's still I'm from America, where we basically run around the planet, blowing people up and taking their fossil fuels. We have a president who's very good at that. He's really into that. He's telling the Native Americans, "Hey, you guys gotta just forget about it." I think Trump just said, "Don't worry about those laws and stuff. I'm president now. You can drill your oil. Just get it out of the ground. What are they going to tell you to do? Put it back in the ground. You got it out. Come on, Chief.
You know that the world is kind of fucked when you can't tell the satirical articles apart from the real ones anymore.
Yeah, the Onion is so screwed, man. Like they have to make serious articles to be funny nowadays. They have to make happy articles. So anyway, but it's like so it's like inextricably linked in the sense of like the. That is like it drove the possibility of having like large global markets, etc. It's technologically driven, and in particular fossil fuel, and in the energy sense, it's driven by that. But also, I feel like it's similar in the sense that you can't it has to keep finding more. Like it's a not cancerous. It's maybe more like it's a juggernaut. It's like a train. It just needs more and more track. Like you can't stop like having your massive oil. Industrial complex. You have cars. You have to have oil for the cars. You need another site to drill, and you can't like slow down. You can't bring it to a halt. You have to keep accelerating. Like in the growth metaphor, like so the question is always like, how many jobs did we add? How much growth did we add? How many dollars did we add to how much does it grow? And that's
zero. Then it's a failure. That's the crazy thing. Because for me, zero is like, okay, well maybe we could do better, but it's okay. The fact that capitalism is hardwired for growth, that it needs to expand constantly every year, I mean, that's just crazy. And I think that also, as you said, I think that locks in quite interestingly with the fossil fuel debate, because, if we are constantly expanding, that means that eventually we're just going to run out of resources. We're going to run out of space. We're going to run out of, fuels, energy. I think that this is a really serious problem that needs to be fixed. And I don't want the world to wind up in this kind of death spiral where we just have more people, more money, more energy, more products, and everything just sort of gets slowly worse, but we're sort of fooled into thinking that it's getting better almost. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's like, I think what it is, I joke that, it's America kind of perfected and like it's a game of I mean, it's why I like those games, because as I mentioned, my experience was, I wasn't doing it, and sometimes I had to do it, but these negative effects and the kind of people who say we're fine, it's okay, is it is because capitalism and and the evolution of the market, used to be like, the Adam Smithian capitalism was like, you go to the market, if somebody has a better tasting apple, then you buy that apple. That's the basic concept, right? Supply and demand, the people who produce better products will win out. But when it evolves to the point of, instead of like you tasting the apple, it's like the corporation, the media is so advanced, it can it's like the Matrix. It can manufacture in your mind that it's better. Like you can manufacture to tourists in Hawaii that it's great in Hawaii and everybody's happy. And this is like, they would actually, like the kids that I was working with, they would be like, if they're in the street in front of the Sheraton or a nice hotel, they'd be beat in the head, and they were basically cops would come beat them up and get them out of there because it was not appropriate.
It's an image problem.
Yeah, it's not appropriate for you to be poor in front of our expensive $1 million Trump hotel or whatever tourism hotel because you're making us look bad by being poor. So it's like, it's your crime was like being too poor, being too indigent in our society. But it's not our fault. It's your fault that you're poor. Get the hell out of here. And so these are the kids that I was like, they'd be giving me the middle finger. They'd be like swearing at me in the class. I was supposed to make them into like science, technology, and engineering and math loving, young kids from the ghetto. And they were like, what the get out of here. Like they'd be like coming in, like they'd be like, swearing and. I was kind of from the area, so I could kind of get that. But on the other hand, I was kind of like, what? I don't know, man. Like, it's a hard sell. Like, how am I supposed to tell you that, this place that you live in, they're telling you that your crime was not being wealthy enough, and you're supposed to just, what do you say to that? I was like, yeah, kid, I feel you, man. That's kind of why I'm out of that city now. I'm not in there anymore. Because it's. But man, the bigger point is that it's the success, and you say like you say, I think it is there has to be a big shakeup of the entire global system to really have a large change. But that is like it's like preempted by the sophistication of the PR, the marketing, the making everything seem not dystopic, and that's why I say it's the corporations are really good at making things not appear dystopic. So when you get off your air-conditioned plane, you get into your air-conditioned bus in Honolulu, you drive to your air-conditioned hotel, it doesn't go down any other routes where you will actually see. They actually put them underneath bridges nowadays so that you can't see the homeless people. And then you get to your air-conditioned hotel, you have your Mai Tai, you watch the sunset, you have somebody dance a fake hula for you, bastardizing the culture. And but you're never going to see any of that because the 75% of this island is tourism economy, and they own the entire political establishment. They own all the media, they own all the newspapers, they own all everything. And so you come, you experience your capitalist big 2 weeks of vacation if you're in America, and then you go back to toiling, and you never see any of that. And it's like, and it's genius. I find it interesting. I'm going to jump off to. I don't want to hurt too much. I don't want to gang up on Disney. All the mega corporations, they all have the same problems. We all know. But it is interesting that Disney recently told EA, I read, to stop. Star Wars Battlefront had microtransactions. I don't know if you're aware of this.
I heard about this controversy.
And so Disney told EA, you need to stop these microtransactions and loot boxes, because all of this, it has a very negative connotation in terms of you're taking advantage of people, and these negative hyper money grubbing vibes, and it's making us look bad. It's making Disney look bad because Star Wars is associated with Disney, and so we need you to stop. And EA stopped.
And Disney is for kids, and we don't want to get kids hooked on loot boxes and gambling and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so I found it was interesting that, and so, I'm not to say anything good or bad. It's not any one corporation's fault, but it is interesting that it's the image, right? It's the image of, you're going to make us look like we're actually doing bad things. What we need is to do bad things and not make it look that way,
Exactly. That's what I find so fascinating, because, like, in this one instance, Disney was kind of the good guy in that they may actually have made a very popular game less exploitative, and they may have actually, like, for example, saved some kids from becoming addicted to loot box gambling or something.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Which could actually have a very positive effect on some people's lives. But at the same time, Disney is this really, really massive corporation which is sort of stomping all over the entertainment industry and has, like, kind of ring-fenced copyright law at this point, which is really weird. As you said, it's all about image. This is kind of one of the things that the game is inspired by, because what really interests me is this idea that corporations and, like, global markets, they don't need to persuade you. They need to make you think that it was your idea to buy their product all along. And I find it really interesting that if there's an advert which tries to persuade you that this product is great, then you kind of negotiate with it. But if the entire culture that you grew up with is geared towards this particular kind of product or this particular approach to the way that you live, then you kind of have no defense against it, because it's like it's a blind spot. So if you grew up in a culture where there is a lot of hypermasculinity, for example, then you might see a product which is marketed towards men, like my favorite is man wipes. They're just big tissues, but they're called man wipes because it's manly or something. And because you're raised in this hypermasculine culture, you might well buy them because they click with what you've grown up with. What terrifies me is this idea that governments, the media, and corporations can, they subtly influence the way that your brain is built. Not even what you think, it's like the infrastructure of the way that you think. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because if you teach people good stuff, if you teach people like critical thinking and independent thought and like working together is good, then I think that's a great message. But in my game, for example, you can just buy up media shares, and then after a few turns, you can literally just pull the culture in one direction. It's measured with sliders, and you literally just pull the culture in one direction by one space, because it does feel kind of like if the media gets too manipulated, if advertisements get too manipulated, you can kind of feel an entire market or an entire culture just kind of shifting.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely the case. I mean, I always it's hard to, you can't see, I haven't worked in anywhere where I would have been necessarily part of that level of shifting an entire country's culture. But I mean, you can definitely feel when culture starts moving in one direction or another. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk too much. I mean, in the U.S., it's definitely a lot has come out about how the most recent president was elected, in terms of individual. A lot of it is times it's people in news sites, people in media companies, basically choosing the stories or shifting the stories in a certain direction. Mm-hmm. Or when the movie, I feel like a lot of culture is the cultural is distributed through. Somebody said that 90% of everything that you think of as reality comes through movies and TV and all these kind of things. Yeah, and I think a lot of times, it's definitely, in American culture, I mean, if you look at, this is one interesting thing is I find that, I'm used to shooter video game, first I came from the first person shooter. I started, mm-hmm. I made a Deus Ex total conversion called Terminus Machina. That was the Deus Ex the first. Mm-hmm. And, because and I'm used to 3 first person shooter games, and it was that was what I thought of as games, and basically games where you do a lot of fighting, and RPGs, and these kind of, even in Mario you're smashing Goombas and stuff, and but shooters in particular, the biggest games, a lot of them, Call of Duties and the Assassin's Creeds and games where you're guys fighting stuff, mm-hmm. And war simulation, war type games. I feel even there, I was what is I didn't even know what a point and click adventure really was, and then I realized they're really huge in other countries, in the UK, mm-hmm. where the biggest industry isn't war necessarily. I mean, not to the level that America is. The type of games, the type of things that get released, the type of movies that get released from the UK. It's very different, and I think as you say, it's not somebody went on and said, hey kids, let's go fight a war. I think they tried that 60 years ago with Uncle Sam, America needs you to go fight the war, Captain America, but it's the propagation of these that shooting and violence and and going off to a country and basically fighting an enemy and mostly using assault rifles and bombs and tanks. As that is just the norm is huge here, and I think that's part of that is because as somebody said, you can't get a big movie made without the military. In the United States, all Michael Bay's movies, you need that aircraft carrier, you need this. They're not going to give you the blessing unless it's going to help support that culture of continuing that.
What you realize with that is that a huge number of blockbuster movies in the last 20 years have been made with the help of the US military, and if the military helps your movie, they only ask that they get final script approval, which means that you cannot criticize the military if you are using their shit.
Yeah.
And that is going to change a lot of people's minds. That's going to, without people even realizing.
Yeah, it's and I could feel it because as I started playing more and reading and playing things from other cultures, I'm why is there what is different about this game, these point and click games, these Wild Jedi games Primordia, and there's something is missing here. I was oh yeah, I'm not killing people every 5 seconds and shooting somebody in the face and that being normal, and I feel it's in the game culture starting to shift. People are starting to recognize that, hey, maybe there could be other games besides that, and there's a lot of critique, going on nowadays. But it is interesting that, that's why I wanted to make a point and click, because I was like, Near Future first was going to be just like, it was going to be like running around shooting mutant rats in a, kind of like a Fallout. It's like a Cyberpunk Fallout crossed with Mega Man, like a platformer, but in a kind of. And I was like, but hey, I wanted to actually tell a story, and it's hard to tell us. It's hard to like feel bad for a character when your character is running around killing thousands of people, and then one of his friends dies, and you're supposed to feel bad about that. It's like
exactly
this whole, it's like it changes the like it just rings so hollow. I started thinking about like, yeah, this is not going to work. I have to make it. It's just why I like the point and click. I shifted to that genre, and where it's not the main game mechanic is not kill stuff or take the stuff of kill things and then take their gold, kill the kobold, kill the enemy country soldier, kill the terrorist, kill the something, and then take its loot, take its gun, and like anyway. So that's long story short. It's basically that's like I've noticed that, and I'm like, yeah, it is weird that all the games are about that, and I guess part of it is just like boys like violence, but part of it is I think there's definitely like an intentional the things that get green lit. It's not that anybody comes through and like makes that decision. It's just that the people who are hired to be the editors and the decision makers and the people who, as you say, look through the scripts and decide what's going to be shipped out to the Steam or to the theater or to wherever. Those people are making decisions. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about? Here's a question. So, what do you think the future is going to look like in? What do you think it will look like in 10 years? What's your prognostication?
Well, first of all, I'm not a political scientist, so I don't really know. That is a tough one. This socialist friend of mine, by the way, it's so handy having a socialist friend, because you can say, I have this friend who has this slightly out there idea, and then you can say what you really think, but you can put it on them. So this nameless socialist friend who does exist, but he has this theory that the reason why Brexit happened and the reason why Trump happened is that fundamentally capitalism kind of it was starting to fail around like 1930 or so, and then World War II kind of kicked it back into gear because governments had to invest a lot into industry. And this was why, come the end of the war, the UK, for example, was able to start the National Health Service because they had all these leftover resources, basically. The country had been made much more efficient because it was governed in a top-down kind of totalitarian fashion for the war effort. And then over the next decades, capitalism started to become less and less efficient because basically any system which siphons money up to the top is not an efficient one. And then Reagan and Thatcher were able to to screw a bit more out of the system and to keep it going, but that now it's kind of on its last legs again, and that this is why there's this political bifurcation, because there's a lot of people who are very angry about the fact that they are kind of getting the short end of the stick, and that your options are either side with a socialist group or blame it on foreigners and go fascist. And I don't know. I think that I guess I'd like to believe that left-wing governments who are sensibly run will get into office as people realize that this is a serious problem and that we don't want the bankers to run the world anymore, and then perhaps sensible legislation might get through. I think that's where we might end up in 10 years. That might be, at the very tail end of that. In the meantime, I can only assume that we're in for a bumpy ride as more and more slightly disgusting right-wing people get voted in, and then they try, and because people think that they're going to fix everything, and then they don't fix everything, but then people double down on it. I'm not sure. I think the next 10 years are going to be pretty rough, but I've got my fingers crossed that in some countries at least, people will vote for more sane options, and we might get some reform that might actually be fairer.
Yeah, in my country, definitely Trump got in, obviously, but it's just recently come to light that the one actually dyed in the wool, like not just a airbrushing, professional photo taker with the indigent or looking for people of color and nailing all their getting their game, as they say, in all the different demographics type of politician. Bernie Sanders, who was he's basically a legit. He didn't all small donations. Basically, he's been saying the same thing he's been saying since. I mean, basically, America's all moved way to the right, and he's been in the same on the basically the left since the 60s when he started. Yeah. And he was and everything that he says is what everybody actually by polls suggest, that Americans want universal health care. Americans want less inequality. Americans want a higher minimum wage. Everything that he says is what America actually believes. And it was only basically I discovered, and it's come out that the Hillary campaign was they were actually
torpedoed him, right?
Yeah, they were. Well, it was revealed that the Donna Brazile, who was like working for the Democratic Party, revealed that the entire Hillary campaign, basically the Democratic Party was running like it didn't have any money in 2015, and they came in and they said, well, we're gonna basically give you all the money you need and millions of dollars, because they have the Clintons have lots of financial assets, and they said, we're gonna give you all the money we need, but we're gonna need to control all of everything that happens in this party. And it was basically decided a year before that whatever happens, Hillary is gonna be the candidate. It doesn't matter who comes up. And
okay.
And it was basically so the popular support was for Bernie Sanders, and in all polls, like, he was ahead of all the candidates. Like, he would have beat Trump in polling. Hillary was like way, like, she was like, even with the polls, which I feel are they're skewed in another way, which is part of why they screwed up. They're skewed towards the side that wants anyways, the Senator Sanders would have probably won, except that they basically did what you say in Spinnortality. They basically took all these ads or these these things that say in California it was like the polls were barely even open, and they said Clinton already won California. Don't show up. Just give up already. In all the major newspapers, and it was written like in emails that were leaked that inside of the Democratic Party they're saying like, no, we need to make it look like Sanders has there are riots and the Sanders supporters are causing fights and violence, and we need to basically don't. And there are people who actually had there were talk show hosts who were told you need to stop talking about Sanders, just stop, by the Democratic Party. Like, these are like direct, and so there was basically the point is there was shenanigans, and ultimately but if we had let him win, maybe would have been closer to this point where people where people's actual frustrations and getting the short end of the stick had led to an actual president who was gonna, at least a president who would do something to kind of reverse that and try institute the take the billionaires down a notch. That was like, it was like a bad word. It was like, why do you keep saying real billionaires? Why do you keep talking about the billionaires? It's like, but I mean, that's what it is. It's like as you said, like, if you keep having wealth escalate up and up and up and up and up, I mean, eventually, it's either there's a war, right, and then we redistribute wealth by expending all the money on bombs and guns, and we get mass. It's a machine that basically it's another human mass psychology that runs its course like a hurricane, right? It builds up all this tension, and then all of a sudden it starts raining, and and that's one way. And another way, I mean, I can't think of a specific place where there was a peaceful a peaceful redistribution, a peaceful method of taking the inequality and that accumulation and redistributing it. I mean, I don't know if that's happened before, but I mean, I don't want to say it can't, because I mean, obviously, Sanders, almost won. Trump is not doing very well nowadays. Like, Steve Bannon, like, the guy who helped him get elected, is bailed. And a lot of people are questioning there's a lot more independent candidates being elected nowadays. So, I think the gives me hope is, the young people, I mean, like you, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but, they're definitely like, smart, they're, you kind of been, a lot of, I'm 34, so I'm kind of like tail end Gen X, super early boomer, but the young people have already been deeply screwed, and they're already growing up living in the meat hook, the dystopian future in terms of like student debt and inability to find jobs and like just horrible prospects. So they're not, and the combination of that plus the internet, where they can get information propagate the information much more rapidly than any other time in history is the one thing that maybe gives me hope. Like where something like, everybody getting on, I mean, as lame as it is, or as kind of, whatever dismissible as it is, the fact that, all these people complaining about something like loot boxes on the internet, and everybody just saying like, hey, what, getting together and just shouting at the top of their lungs that we don't want this negative capitalistic, causing a gaming dystopia kind of behavior to continue. That impacted Star Wars, and it made a big enough impact on Disney that they made a change. So I don't know, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 27.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little older than I look, but I still count myself as a millennial. But I've also fallen foul of the whole student loan problem.
Oh, are you eating a lot of avocado toast? You got to stop, man. You got to.
Oh, no. Oh, I cannot get enough of that avocado toast.
I just read something in the article said, New York wealthy are struggling. The New York affluent are struggling to live on $190 million. That was an actual real article. Look it up. So I don't know, but I don't know how it is in the UK or in Austria. But I mean, I don't know what is the situation like where you are? Like, is it?
Well, I mean, in the UK, I haven't been back there for a while. I visit for holidays to visit family and so on, but I haven't lived there, so I don't feel it so much. We have a candidate who is a bit like Bernie Sanders, and he is actually the leader of the Left Party. He did not win the last election, but he did do a lot better than anyone expected. And that election was called basically to shoot him in the face. And he completely flipped the table on the situation. So I think that there's still hope there. But in the meantime, we have a right-wing government in power who they seem to be nice and polite, but they harbor a lot of extremely troubling views, and that makes its way into legislation. There was a recent article, a recent study in which some independent experts estimated that the government, I think it's been around for 3 or 4 years now, the government is responsible, because it had a lot of budget cuts and it cut a lot of benefits, for 120,000 deaths. So make no mistake, this stuff kills people. There are people who have been certified fit to work, and so they lose their unemployment benefit literally while they are on their deathbed. So...
Ouch.
And I think that the government and the media does a very good job of concealing that and making everything seem like it's all ticking along wonderfully. And for a lot of people, it does tick along fine. But I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that there are some people who are literally starving to death.
In Austria, the UK?
Pardon?
Is that in the UK?
Exactly, in the UK. And in Austria, I don't follow politics so much here, but there was a recent election and the fascist party got in. And there's a tradition that everyone has a moment of silence and stands respectfully every year in Parliament to commemorate the Holocaust. And all of the right-wing politicians very pointedly did not do that. And I think that's a very bad sign. It makes me want to go and shout at some fascists or something. And there are other problems in Austria. Austria got hit with kind of medium intensity with the whole Syrian refugee problem. And by the way, my opinion is, hey, they're refugees. If they were not here, they would be dead. I would much rather have them here. And there's actually a game that came out recently called Path Out, which was made by a Syrian refugee living in Austria, telling his autobiographical story about fleeing Syria. So that's kind of interesting. But I think that it's created an additional tension. And I think that that's another reason why the right have become quite strong here. I feel like Vienna is a city that's sort of in two halves, because the conservative people here are really fucking conservative. But the left-wing people here, the queer people, the polyamorous people, the people who, the students who dye their hair all kinds of colors, they are so alternative. And that gives me a lot of hope, because a lot of them are very nice people. So I feel like it's a city and a country of two halves.
Yeah. It's definitely like, well, in the U.S., I mean, on the on the fascist fighting, Yeah, definitely. Like there is well, I mean, obviously there is there were marches here in the United States, and there's the anti-fascist, the fascist, and then the anti-fascist movement, which it's nice to see that. Yeah, a lot of the same kind of crowd. The people who a lot of them are college students, or a lot of them are, or not necessarily, but they're all walks of life. But on the left, come out. We had like people. There was a big march in Charleston where somebody actually died there. They were holding tiki torches. They were like saying blood and soil, and basically
I heard about this shit. Oh, it's horrible.
Scary stuff, right? And but thankfully, like the anti-fascist movement. I mean, there's an argument, right, that says that when you have any violence is bad, and so we shouldn't be going out and punching the fascists. But the other argument is when you have this kind of thing, like when you have, I mean, unfortunately, this is, I mean, kind of going to tie it back in. I feel like part of World War II to set World War One. It's unfortunately it's a very similar situation. You had a depression. You had Germany, where they were basically under massive debt. I mean, after the First World War, right? They were basically the creditors, right? Like said basically like Trump is telling Puerto Rico, you need to pay us back. It doesn't matter what it takes. I don't care how poor and starving you get. You're gonna pay us all that goddamn money back. Or else, like Greece, Venezuela. I mean, there's a lot of countries, right? They're like, we're gonna bloodlet you. We're gonna basically drive you into the ground until you give us all of our money back. And then it got worse and worse and worse. People were, and the Germans were like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. This is getting like middle America, white Americans, guys are like, my prospects are going down. It's for the first time. The life expectancy has dropped if you're a white guy in America, and they're making less money. I mean, for everybody else it's been bad, but for them it's a new thing. They're committing suicide. They're doing
life isn't fantastic. My God.
yeah. It's like and it's on one hand it's like entitled you white guy American, but also on the other hand it's like it's part of a larger thing. Where. And the scary thing is, it's like the reaction was, we need somebody who's going to make us, manly guys again, especially like, young guys, right? That's who was leading the Nazi party in Germany. And it's like, somebody's going to come, and Hitler was there to say, hey, you can be German again. It's okay. We're going to make us great again. We're going to rise to the top, and we're going to find the enemy, and the enemy is all those Jews over there. And then we get rid of them, and then it's,
they found the target. Yeah. The masses on that target, and that was the whole recipe. I'd like to point out as well that Hitler said the one thing that could possibly have stopped the Nazi party was if people had just literally gone around in groups and beaten up Nazis. So, hey, I mean, maybe there's a lesson there.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why, I was like, I was thinking about it, then I was like, and then somebody made a good, I mean, it's been made a lot, but that, the only thing that tolerance cannot tolerate is intolerance. Just to try to bring it back, I mean, I'm glad to hear that I'm not insane, because I had another talk with someone else who was, basically kind of said like, I don't know what you're talking about with this dystopia cyberpunk stuff. I don't know what you're talking about. Things are hunky dory. So it's good to talk to somebody who's like on the level. That's really nice.
I think the problem is if you are living a life where everything is already like, if you're on track, if you have a nice job, if you have a mortgage, if you can see yourself being successful in 5 years, then this stuff just does not affect you. You just don't see it, and that's the issue. It doesn't really affect me too much, but I go out of my way to read articles and watch videos and listen to other points of view so that I can hopefully understand the bigger picture. And that's why I like systems-driven games so much, and that's why I made this one. Because I think that these kinds of games allow you to understand the system in its totality. Whereas if you were just looking at it from one point of view, then you would understand more of the details, you would understand more of the nuances, but you wouldn't understand how the whole thing locked together. And so this game is basically just my attempt to try and take pretty much everything that we talked about over the last hour and a half, and just kind of build a system that represents that and shows it to people. Because this stuff seems obvious to me because I've been thinking about it like non-stop for 4 or 5 years. But I think for most people, it's not there. They don't see it, and so it doesn't exist for them.
Yeah, totally. Which is why I'm like, I'll tell again, if you haven't, I recommend everybody go out and help this Kickstarter, or at least. Yeah, and definitely play Spinnortality. I mean, if you can't Kickstart it for whatever you got, I mean, if you're one of those, loot creators who has $200,000 a year to spend upgrading your elf and getting magic missile level 30,000, spend $200,000 on this game instead of dicking around in Fantasyland, okay? Because this is the real world, buddy. Anyways,
there is a very high pledge tier for people who have more money than I could possibly imagine. So if you're one of those people and you want to throw money at something, this is a perfect target.
Yeah. Take that last $1 million you're gonna donate to the make Hawaii look less dystopic fund that you were gonna give so you can write it off. Give it to. I'm telling you right now. I'm a native Hawaiian. I'm telling you, give it to Jamie Patton right now. Okay, all right, and give me a. I want to cut back after. Okay, but no, just kidding. But anyways, it's like no, I mean this is like total. This is like exactly the kind of games that I wanted. I haven't quite had anybody on the podcast who was quite at this level of I would call it not militant cyberpunk, but at least actively had a something other than just entertainment. In the game, I mean, not that I don't want to say everybody is not doing games that are just entertainment that I had on the podcast, but I mean, definitely, and that's kind of what I wanted. I always say I would like to live in a world where there is, I would like to live in the world where there are more games that are doing more things than just keeping people distracted, blowing off some steam. I like blowing off steam. I like playing Doom. I'm like, I'll get on and, Team Fortress with the best of them when I, just need to. But I would like there to, everybody's like, why aren't games art? Games should be considered art. Games should be elevated to the level. I feel like, and it's like, it's up to us. It's up to the indie, in particular, it's up to indie developers such as us, because obviously AAA corporations don't have the, they don't, their modus operandi, their constitution dictates that they will not. Their constitution, their existence is predicated on continued making of money. So if anything other than that is basically not going to be on the radar. And if that involves critiquing the system in which they make money, they will never do that, I feel, to any significant degree, which is why it has to be, indie. Like, if there is hope for the future, if there is hope for the future generally, and hope for the, gaming and cyberpunk, and games being considered something more socially, culturally important and relevant than just time wasters, it's going to be up to people like you and anyway. So yeah, I definitely want. Just a little bit on Neofeud. But Neofeud's. I feel like it's actually very much a very similar game in the sense that Neofeud, it's neo-feudalism. So my take was like, I was watching a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with Game of Thrones. You watch that show at all?
Oh yeah, I watched a lot of Game of Thrones.
Oh, you watched a lot? Okay, so yeah, I was watching Game of Thrones, and me and Mrs. Silverspook, we watched Game of Thrones during the day. That was kind of like our overlap, and then I was like reading Neuromancer and watching Blade Runner at night, and I was like, the feudal society or the medieval, that society where there was basically, there's the lords and ladies, like there's the Lannisters, there's the Tyrells, there's the Starks. They all have their massive fortunes. And if you're not one of those, the stories in Game of Thrones are about the nobles, the great people who have their bards and their long books of all of their titles and their great works and things that they've done. And then there's everybody else, but you don't hear about any of the common people. But most of the people in the time in which this book was written about, which was like, the early, middle of the, after, between 1000 and 2000 AD, it was not a very fun time for you. Basically, you would have died probably young. You probably would have been off to fight a war for some rich noble, and you would have died there. Or maybe if you got lucky, you got a title and you got lorded yourself if you were one of the lucky few. But anyways, I was thinking like this is very similar, to, as you said, like, the thing is, to make money nowadays, the best advice you can give is don't work hard, don't stay in school, don't study anything in particular, just marry some rich person. They say the number one thing, I think it was the number one recommendation at Harvard is be born unto rich parents. That's the best way to get rich, right? and so feudalism, and so so it's like, it's like if you're born a Lannister, if you're born a Stark, if you're born a Tyrell, then that's all you have to do, and then basically just don't screw up from there. Like, don't piss off anybody rich, and you're fine. And for the most part,
I thought that we all kind of agreed that was a bad system, but we're back here. It's crazy.
They're very good at the Villa Straylight is very good at In Neuromancer's the Villa Straylight, the place from which the Tessier Ashpool family are from, they get off the radar by not being on the planet. That's their solution. It's like, let's not even exist where everybody can see us, and then we'll continue this. But and I feel like, again, that's the airbrushing and like, making it seem like it's not neo-feudalism, where I feel like, I mean, that was kind of my thing, was like it is. And in the game, I mean, we're unwinding a few tangents. The neo-feud, basically you're you're a social worker who's trying to help out this. There's the corporate, like in your game, I think it was one of the things you could research is mind uploading or body transference.
Yeah, one of the goals is that you become immortal by transferring your consciousness into a new body, and that's a whole research tree. Yeah. Yeah,
and so like in Neofeud, it's taking the idea that the corporations and the elite have on the way to producing the perfect Ubermensch, the perfect body into which you transfer your body that never dies, never gets old, is always beautiful and sexy and that super strong and super smart. On the way to making that, they produce all of these, androids and chimeras and transgenics and half humans. Like it's like Edison out of 10,000 light bulbs before he made the right one. And so these are
sense, yeah.
And so there are 9,999,000 wrong ways to make a body, and they're all robot. And so most of them are dysfunctional. They're defective. They're not good enough. They're like last season's iPhone. The last season's Android servant gets discarded and thrown down into the ghetto. And the main character is basically a social worker whose job is to socialize. My job was to socialize these kids from the ghetto where I'm from. So it's kind of like, he's trying to take care of his job is to take care of them. Meanwhile, he's being paid garbage and living in basically one step from homelessness. And, it kind of goes from there up to, it spirals upward through different levels of the higher and higher levels of the class system, into eventually you find the neo-feudal elite. Basically, they're all scheming against each other. Like, what do you do in corporatocracy, where each of the elite families are scheming against each other, unlike Game of Thrones, and, plotting an assassination, trying to steal the other one's technology, and you're kind of caught in between that. And so anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think there's a lot of, I guess Neofeud is kind of taking it from the, it's from the traditional, from the ground up. And although one of the main characters is not Cersei Lannister, because she's kind of a bitch. Who's the nice one? The nice Tyrell girl.
Oh crap, the one played by Natalie Dormer, you mean?
Marjorie.
Marjorie, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the characters is kind of like a Marjorie Tyrell kind of character. So but anyway, I should stop talking about myself. But anyway, I just wanted to say, like, yeah, I mean, I think that that this game, generally speaking, is hitting on all the right points. I'm gonna definitely go and play it. I haven't played it yet, but I will play it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I hope. I want to have you back on here after, maybe like in the future, maybe after the Kickstarter, and maybe when things, maybe when you finish it.
Maybe on launch that would be a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, on launch. Yeah, then we'll get it. We'll get it. When is the launch, by the way?
Well, I've said August 2018, but that will depend on how well the Kickstarter goes. If the Kickstarter fails, then it will probably still be August 2018. But there will be no extra stuff. The game will just be like what I have now, and some extra content and a few polishes here and there, and that'll just be it. Because if it can't generate enough money from the Kickstarter, then it's not worth putting more of my time into it. Because I really do want to explore more game ideas, and I'd like to. If it fails, then at that point it's starting to hold me back rather than help me. If I make the Kickstarter, then it will still be August 2018, but I will be able to cut back on my day job, and then I will spend a lot more time working on it, and it will be more polished. If it somehow makes a huge amount of money, then I would probably work on it for longer, and I would add more features. So then it might be like, third or fourth quarter 2018, but it would certainly be launched sometime next year.
All right, so all right,
and I'd just like to say that anyone is welcome to just play the demo. There is a demo build there. It's literally just the latest build. I put it up there. You can play that for free, and even if you can't pledge, I think that this Kickstarter is going to live or die based on how much exposure it gets. Because I have 161 Twitter followers. I think I have a normal number of Facebook friends. it's quite hard just getting the word out to people. So if you can't help with money, I totally get it. I mean, that's kind of what the game is about. But it would be great if you could tweet about it or post it on Facebook or something, just to help spread the word a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, on the visibility thing, I'm going to be talking to somebody soon about. I'm hoping to talk to somebody about the nature of the indie industry soon. But yeah, if you and it is one of the biggest things, visibility. Just recently, I mean, in some sense, 2017. I mean, I hate to break this to you, but like 2015 or 16 would have been the good time to release. Steam has like 6,000 games released this year.
That would have been a great time to get into the industry, and I totally missed that boat.
Yeah, me too. Like, I mean, I took an extra year to make sure Neophyte was polished, and if I had released it in 2016, it probably would have done a lot better. I mean, I'm not calling Indiepocalypse or anything, but it is not the case that getting on Steam and having a good game is enough to make your game successful, in the sense of both monetarily successful in terms of making their money back, and also in terms of anybody playing it. I mean, I've seen games on Steam and there's like one guy reviewing it. So I mean, I think what this is why I started the podcast part of it, and why I'm talking to you is that I do believe that it is up to kind of like how like you have to get your butt out and vote the fascists and the corporate overlords out. You have to get out and kickstart and spread the word on your game, and you have to personally make it a reality, because Steam is not that Steam is doing anything wrong. It's just that there's an influx. It's a lot of voices. There's a lot of games out there. You have to.
I don't know if it's Steam's job to curate, but like in the past, Steam was like a seal of quality, and now Steam is just a store. And maybe that's okay, I don't know. But if Steam has become a store, then we need something else to filter the games that we might like. Because Steam is not doing a very good job of doing that by itself.
Yeah, I mean, here's a pitch I'll do for, and I'm full disclosure, I'm not getting a sponsorship, but itch.io is my preferred site.
It's lovely. Oh, it's so wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, have you tried to play it or used it?
Oh, I put my last game on itch.io. That was the only reason I made any money off it, because it had the donation feature.
Yeah. Itch.io is that's where I first released Neophyte. I mean, it's a lower bar, and I didn't do Greenlight, but I do like it. Hint to Steam. It's it's pay what you want. You can decide the cut. I mean, this is like kind of a revolutionary thing. You make the person who's the seller can choose, how much you want to give or not give. It's like you can set. I mean, there's a lot less toxic stuff going on in terms of the community because of the way that the creator can decide. I mean, one thing I would like Itch to do is maybe like give the option of having more community input if they want on the page, or like I can't figure out how to get the ratings for Neophyte to show up. Like it's gotten all like maybe basically it's got all 5 stars. I mean, but it doesn't have tons of them. But I would like to be able to show that on the page. But I mean, other than a few like things I would like it to do a little better, I feel like its model of it's really upfront. There's the money goes straight to the person who made the game. There's you basically choose how you want your site to be displayed. I mean, one thing is, it's hard to filter the quality of games, but I do feel like there's potential for there's potential for it to take some more share from Steam, especially now when Steam is not. If Steam is not the place where you can get on there and guarantee something, I mean, like, what is it really doing? If it's still taking I can't tell you what the Steam cut is, but it's still taking an industry standard level of the revenue, and so what is the point, right? And so I mean that's the thing I'm asking myself right now is, I mean, like Neophyte, it has done better on Steam than on Itch in terms of the numbers wise. It's a magnitude greater, but I see that dropping off.
That's why Steam is valuable. I mean, Steam has built up this huge player base. If you get on Steam, it just randomly through people browsing through the store, some more people are going to buy it. Itch simply has fewer customers. But I would like to see some people make the switch from Steam to Itch, or at least to that rhymes, or at least to use Itch as well, because I feel really respected when I use Itch. I feel like a lot of control is put in the hands of the creators, and I feel like Itch was created because this person wanted to change the games industry for the better and provide a platform. So yeah, I really do hope that Itch continues to grow and continue to take off.
Yeah.
Also because it's not good to have a monopoly in anything.
Yeah, exactly. Stop cyberpunk dystopia, break all the monopolies, including the one that starts with an S and ends with an eam. I'm gonna make that the new slogan. Make the switch, jump to itch or something. And I'll make up like a nice ad with I'll put Spintortality and Neophyte and some other good cyberpunk. Anyways, yeah, it's like but yeah, I mean, I one final thing I'll say about itch is is the creator. It's kind of like if we take the Spintortality where you have one person, a lot of times one small handful of people determine the culture for everyone else. And so on itch, I mean, it was the guy who started, as I understand it was it was basically that kind of guy. It was just a guy who wanted to start a thing, and his goal wasn't like, I want to go and like make lots of money by making a competitor to Steam. It was, I want to go and make a better game marketplace, a game place. And so and the philosophy and everything behind it is I'm 100% behind it. So help itch out, itch.io. I mean, maybe there's another site that's better, but as I understand it, I recently read a poll. 25% of people say that they would rather, I think it's 25% would rather have itch dominate. I think it was a big pull to all gamers. So it is gaining steam. It used to be like 10, it was like a small percent.
So it's fantastic. I love that.
It's gaining steam. So I really do hope that it moves forward with that. Anyway, so Cyberpunk. Let's see. We're gonna wrap it shortly. But let me see if I had anything else I wanted to ask you. I think that's basically it. Yeah. So Cyberpunk games. Spintortality is
the name is Spinnortality. It's
shoot. Okay.
See,
sorry about
that. Okay, but everyone makes this mistake, and I kind of feel like maybe I should change the name now. It's a combination of spin, as in spinning marketing, spinning products, and immortality, because that's one of the goals of the game. You become immortal by transferring your brain. So the game is Spinnortality with 2 N's for anyone who wants to search for it on Kickstarter. But it's called Spinnortality, a cyberpunk management game. So if you just put cyberpunk in the search bar, then you'll eventually find it.
Yeah, that's one thing. I mean, one thing on the indie game side, I would say, like, this is why I choose really weird words for a game. Like, the next game is like Dismaton, and the current one is Neophyte. Non-existent words for games for anybody, for the indie dev people watching, listening. Choose really weird, non-existent words. It's the best thing you can do. I mean, because
as a counterpoint to that, it is very easy to search for this thing because it can only ever be spelled one way. But the problem is people are having trouble remembering it. That's like you did it within this podcast, and it happened a few weeks ago with this other person who was talking about the game. So I'm starting to wonder if maybe it might be better to change the name to something that's not as crazy. So by all means, choose a new word that doesn't exist, but don't overthink it like I did.
I think on the Spintortality, I think it's there's a lot of
mortality, you see.
I mean, the reason why I was thinking of that, the crossy, there's a lot of cyberpunk and stuff that's like, dystopian kind of stuff that ends with like idiocracy, plutocracy. I mean, there's other things that have that, and I think it's when I think of the topic of the game and I think of the things that are going on. I mean, it's something that is critiquing the system in which the world is governed and and it just kind of like it just comes into my brain that way because I know it's Spinnortality and I've typed it into Google a few times. So if there's any possibility of changing that, I mean, now it's still kind of early days. Maybe that's the thing. I mean, once you get as far along as let's say like Neophyte, I can't change it because I've been marketing this thing for a long time. But if you have a possibility, maybe that's something it's worth thinking about.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I haven't had a huge amount of press. I've had some press response, and I am really thankful for the press that I've got. But I can count the number of articles about it in English on one hand, and I can count the number of articles total on 2 hands. So I think probably the most people who know about it via either my newsletter or the Kickstarter. So if I were to change the name, I think I would just tell those groups of people and then just change it. So.
That's probably could something worth thinking. Don't take this is not. I'm not a professional marketer, so no, it's not. No, I mean, here's my corporate thing. Yeah, no responsibility can be put on me if your game fails. Sorry, but
that is fine. I've signed the disclaimer.
Okay, good verbal signing. Anyways, so Spinnortality Kickstarter. Everybody get out and help him out.
Thank you. It's made like nearly 40% of its goal, but I'm worried that it's stalling. So anything will be fantastic.
Yeah, so help him out, because we really, I mean, the world, I mean, I'm not just because I'm a Cyberpunk fan do I want to see this game succeed and be made, people play it, and also Jamie should get some, money so that he can continue to exist on the planet, and not just be a, well, I basically help him out, and I want everybody to play it, and I want more of these kind of games to come out, and if this game succeeds, then more true. It sounds so elitist when I say this, but like true cyberpunk, in cyberpunk in the social sense, social intellectual sense, games. I want more games, movies, books to come out. I want it to reclaim its rightful heritage. It sounds so neo-feudal. I wanted to reclaim what it was. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Let's say, like, rather than being elitist, because I love the aesthetic of Cyberpunk. I think it's wonderful anyway. But let's say that there aren't enough, like, socially critical or culturally critical Cyberpunk games. There aren't enough Cyberpunk games that actually think about capitalism and wealth distribution. And you can have both, but it would be nice to have more of that kind as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's like, because I feel it's like it's more not just for gaming, but for the world. It's one more pretentious thing I'll say is like, yeah, because it will help change gaming and the world. But I do feel like that every little bit of movements are not just like one guy it's not like suddenly Bernie Sanders or Martin Luther King or one guy just got up and decided I'm going to change the world. It's everybody slowly little ripples pushing in one direction to eventually make the rogue wave that overturns the Titanic of capitalism, or overturns the ship that's headed in a bad direction. So I think, like, I hope that more of these kind of games get made. I hope more of these books get written. I'm gonna keep making them. I'm sure that you will, as long as you have your basics. And I think that and anybody else who's interested, if you're listening to this, I'd be interested to talk to you. If you're into cyberpunk, science fiction, anything that we've talked about, a creator, basically just as long as you're not a rich, evil guy, I'll probably talk to you. And I'd like to thank my guest, Jamie Patton.
It's my pleasure. Thank you
for being on. You wanted to give any final, like, where we can find you?
Yeah, sure. If you want to find out more about the game, then just go to spinnortality.com. As I said, it's with 2 N's. If you want to find the Kickstarter, just go to Kickstarter and search Spinnortality, or just search Cyberpunk. My blog is james-patton.net. I don't update there too much, but if you are interested in my games long term, then you can also go there and sign up to the newsletter, because I will post any games that I make in the future on there. But right now, spinnortality.com is where the action is. Awesome.
Okay, so yeah, you guys know where to find him. I'm Christian Miller, aka Silver Spook. Silver Spook. Everybody just Google Silver Spook, or Neofeud is the game. And Silver Spook. My Twitter handle is too long. Here's one more tip: if you're gonna make a Twitter game company name, make something that can fit in the Twitter handle, because mine is Silver Spook minus the E, so that kind of sucks. But it's okay. Silver Spook. There's no, unless somebody makes a Silver Spook company and makes a lot of money, I think I'm okay for now. Cross my fingers. Anyways.
I see.
Yeah, so if I do, I'm going to ask Jamie for help, because he knows how to corporate spin things to make my thing show up.